Okay, so welcome to our first panel. My name is Roger Herbert. I came up with 3 hypotheses for why Ed asked me to introduce this panel. The first, and this is probably the least likely, is that Ed's just in denial right now that I have retired. I retired in August here. He's just in denial, so he brings me back up. That's probably the least likely. So probably a little more likely is that he just didn't realize I had gone. Yeah, I left a little while ago, Ed. Still, I think hypothesis number 3 is the one that's closest to the truth. And that is that once you start working for Ed Barrett, you never stop. There's no exit from that. So you're always going to be on his docket. And that could be somewhat morally problematic if you start thinking about it, but not today, because I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our 2 panelists. 2 folks who are absolutely on the leading edge of figuring out AI strategically, technically, tactically, and of course ethically for the Marine Corps and for the Navy. So it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Jennifer Edgin. Ms. Edgin is the Assistant Deputy Commandant for Information at Headquarters Marine Corps. Ms. Edgin was selected to the senior level in September of 2013, serving as the Chief Technology Officer and War Room Director. She began her career as a test engineer at the Naval Service Warfare Center, Indian Head Division, completed a rotational assignment at Naval Sea Systems Command Strategic Plans and Programs, and later transitioned to Navy Sea Systems Command, managing submarine overhaul and maintenance periods. Ms. Edgin holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering from Penn State University and a Master's of Science degree in Engineering and Technology and Management from George Washington University. Mr. Brett Vaughan assumed the role of Navy Chief AI Officer in December 2019. Prior to that, he was, and he still holds, the position of Artificial Intelligence Portfolio Manager for the Office of Naval Research. Prior to joining ONR, Mr. Vaughan served as Science and Technology, Integration and Innovation Lead on the Chief of Naval Operations staff. Prior to joining the Department of Navy, Mr. Vaughan spent a 20-year career with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. He is a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Naval War College, earning a Master of Arts degree in National Security and Strategic Studies, and holds a master's degree in environmental science from Johns Hopkins University. So everyone, please join me in welcoming our panelists.
I'll start. There's a clock. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I do these a lot, so I like to start off with a little quiz for you guys. And it's not just an academic exercise. There's a prize. You get this Navy AI patch. I've only had 2 winners. One was a naval officer in the Ecuador Navy, and one was a civilian. So I'm really hoping that the mids and the Marines come through. So who is accredited with coining the term artificial intelligence? Andrew, you're disqualified because you probably know the answer and you already have a patch. Just yell it out. No. Good answer, though. No. Good answer, though. What was that? No. Okay, 3 strikes. You guys are out. John McCarthy, mathematics professor at Dartmouth. He also served at Princeton, Stanford. In a paper for a conference on computational intelligence, 1955, at Dartmouth. He first used the term artificial intelligence. Since then, that's where we trace the origin of the discipline. What I want to talk about, really, at a high level, three things. The Navy views AI as a competency, not just a technology. And an important part of that competency is the deliberate and meaningful alignment of a problem or mission function and AI, a type of AI. AI is not a single technology. It's a constellation of technologies, and it's critical to make sure you arrive at a good, meaningful, and impactful match. AI is not a silver bullet. It is, in some cases, not the tool you want to use. So that, what I call problem to AI matching, that calculus is critical. And then the last high-level point is that in the Navy, we view AI ethics as ethics. We don't view AI ethics as a singular, siloed, separate thing. It's part and parcel of ethics. Just like any other tool in the toolbox, AI is just one of those tools. So as you use it for everything we've talked about so far today, what matters, what's paramount, are our general set of ethics in what we are trying to achieve, or use AI to enable or improve. So that's important. So what I want to do with the time I have today is give you a little short history of the Navy and AI. I'll talk about where we are today. I'll talk about the potential of AI. I'll talk about the challenges. When we started, someone asked, what are limitations, right? So I'll talk about the things that are holding us back or the challenges we face. And then I want to close up talking about the human element, because AI is a very, you probably guessed, if we view AI as a competency, humans are crucial and key and at the center point. So that's important. So the short history, the Navy, for those not aware, we've been swimming in the AI pool since the inception of the discipline, since the 50s. Our experts, most of them, the 80,000-pound brains, live and work mostly at the Naval Research Lab down in D.C. But we have AI experts at ONR and all our warfare centers, and as part of our research and development enterprise. So we have a really solid cadre of AI experts. When I came to this job 2 or so years ago, it was difficult to look across service and ascertain who's using AI for what Navy function and what type of AI are they developing and using. That was one of the first tasks that I launched into, because as the AI portfolio manager, without a site picture like that, without knowing where you are, it's hard to tell how you're going to get to your North Star and what's standing in your way and what will be accelerators, right? So I'm happy to say we have that tool today. One of the key aspects of my job is to manage that inventory and a set of dashboards that give us insight to that work. I'll tell you that today, the number of AI-related efforts exceeds 1,000. And I think most people are surprised by that. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort. That may sound like good news, but there's more. We'll get to that in a second. It is good news, I should say that. But there are other elements in play here, and I'll explain that. The majority of those efforts today still reside in our R&D enterprise, in the lab, if you will. Here's why that is an issue or a concern. So last year, the National Security Commission on AI launched their final report, March of last year. They put the department on notice that you as a department, you, DOD, are not sufficiently man-trained equipped for this AI competition. And then they put us on a very short game clock. They said, you will be AI-enabled by 2025. This is a recommendation to the President and the Congress. So, one other thing they said, that we are today in an age of AI deployment. So that's the point I want you to look at in contrast with what I just said. We've been doing this for decades, and most of the terrific work that's been done is in an R&D environment in a lab. And the challenge for us, the imperative for us, is to move as much of that today as practical and makes sense and as possible into the field. The sooner we do that, the sooner we're going to confront and vanquish issues like ethical AI and a host of others. Because as long as it stays in the lab, all of those lessons, good and bad, will remain in the lab. And we need to, what I call, get our reps and sets. We need to move AI into the fleet and the force, and we will learn. That's important because I think only through that kind of exposure experience are we going to raise trust and impact our culture so it's more accepting of technologies like this. We do it with other tools as well. There's reticence at first, but the more you're familiar with it, the more you know how it operates, and you start to change your tolerances, the faster the acceptance comes. I think that's critical. So we need to flip the ratio. So one of my jobs is to take that huge number that's in R&D and flip that ratio. So there's a bigger number in operation and scaling, that we're scaling more than we're actually doing in the lab. That is the game today. That's the challenge for us. Where we do that is almost limitless. There's a vast potential for artificial intelligence to enhance naval operations. You could pick any function, any mission. I could probably find an application where AI could be suitably used and could raise the bar. And raise the bar really in two big areas. Improving operational efficiency and corporate efficiency, and reducing risk to humans, and removing them from harmful situations as well. Those are two really chief reasons why we go after AI in the first place. So the question is, infinite potential, but resources obviously aren't infinite, right? There's got to be a purposeful and deliberate necking down of potential versus priorities, right? How are we doing that today? In the Navy, every CNO publishes their strategic vision. Current CNO, his vision is the NAV plan, the navigation plan. That plan has been broken down into 18 discrete objective areas. AI is one of them. So I'm running that. But as I said, we're not doing that in a vacuum. Our goal inside that effort is to enable all the other objectives with AI. At the top of that stack, the highest priority areas that we're bringing AI to bear, how we defend, how we maneuver, how we shoot, and how we resupply at a very high level. Those are the functional areas where we are today looking to push forward with the application and adoption of artificial intelligence. When we do that, think about what General Groen said about his picture of the iceberg, right? He said ecosystem. That's exactly right. The mental model we use to shape AI for things like defend, maneuver, resupply, shoot is what we call the AI stack. That is a representation of an AI ecosystem. It's several components: data, transport, compute, models, algorithms, things that need to be brought together into a healthy ecosystem. They all need to be there, they need to play, and they need to be sustained, made resilient, and tuned over time. It's not fire and forget by any stretch. It's very iterative, and that's part of a culture change we need to make. difference between doing hardware and software. General Groen mentioned that as well. If part of your stack is AWOL or deficient, you're getting ready to drop an AI algorithm into a toxic environment. You don't want that. So the stack also provides a good diagnostic tool. Do I have the conditions? Are conditions good and right for AI adoption? So the stack is very important. But not just the technology piece of it. There's also how you employ the technology is critical, at least for us. In the Navy, we are pursuing an operational employment concept called AI Fusion, which is the balancing of centralized AI and distributed AI. In other words, most people, when they look at AI today, are thinking of a centralized model where you're moving a lot of data into an environment, curating it, and letting the algorithms do the work. Data to algorithms. Distributed AI is the opposite. It's the inverse. In the bridge of a ship in the Pacific, you don't want to be in the business of moving a lot of data around. You want to move algorithms to the data. Both of those are what we call AI Fusion. Our academic partners are helping us develop that, Carnegie Mellon in particular. And I wish I could claim credit for thinking of it, but that's how we're going to make AI applicable and real for concepts like distributed maritime operations and the CNO's NAV plan. So what are our challenges? What's holding us back? Quite simply, the technology side of AI is pretty straightforward for me. I'm more concerned about, and I'd say it's like 15 to 20% of the equation. General Groen uses that number. The 80% is mostly culture and practice related. I talked about it a little bit, hardware versus software, industrial versus digital. But if you look at the way software is done, it gives you a good sense of the ways in which we need to change, just a lot of things. How we write requirements, how we send those requirements around, how the technologists do their work, how they work with the user, the warfighter, how you tune it, how you maintain it, how you test evaluate it. All those things are very different for an industrial organization like the Navy. We are in a phase shift, moving parts of the Navy from that industrial mode to a digital mode. That's imperative to being effective in AI and scaling AI. We have to move quicker and more effectively into the digital space. We don't want to be the Lancers in the digital fight, right? So in that, if the large part is practice-focused, obviously humans are key. They're also the block, right? We're in our own way in many cases. The way we do work in the Pentagon, a lot of those practices, and I'm not saying those practices should be displaced. They're not good practices for software or digital things. We need both, right? But too many times we try and do things like AI inside the old practices, and that's got to shift if we hope to be successful in AI. And speed and velocity are one of the things that is of vast importance and critical and key. So in the Navy, one of the ways we get at doing that, of changing the culture, changing the force, is through Navy AI task forces. When we looked at the National Commission's report, that 800-page document, when I looked at it, if you collect all the issues, recommendations, it really is man, train, equip for me. So many of those issues are man, train, equip. In the Navy, the organizations that hold that mission are type commanders. So undersea warfare, surface warfare, aviation, special operations, expeditionary. So a couple of years ago, one of those warfare enterprises decided to go get after AI, man, train, equip, look at the missions within their enterprise, and do that calculus I talked about. What type of AI works good for, you name it. And they started to start pulling the levers, changing the culture within their enterprise. Today, we have one of those AI task forces in every type commander. And we're seeing variants as well, like Task Force 59, General Groen mentioned. the 5th Fleet Unmanned and AI Task Force. It's not a man-trained-equipped task force. It's very operationally focused, but I welcome them into the AI Task Force Club with open arms, and they are doing amazing things as a very small and effective type of unit. But that's how we're eating the elephant. You got to imagine, right? AI across the whole service. How are you going to change the ship of culture? It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to do it all at once. So we're taking it type commander by type commander. One of my jobs is to make sure there's uniformity above all those and across those in policy guidance and things like that. Measures. How do we know we're getting there? How do we know we're making progress? General Groen touched on this as well. I think one of the most important measures is agility. Put another way, how fast are you able to impact a platform or a person with software? What is your rate of refresh and update? How often and effective are you at pushing code to a warfighter? It's huge. If you look at the naval task list and want to get more finely focused, any naval task where there's decision-making involved, which is almost everyone, decision-making accuracy and decision-making speed are two of the metrics we look for AI to help or increase or improve performance. And then General Groen also mentioned scaling AI. That's the coin of the realm. That's the big target. We have adopted a maturity model, 5 phases. Phase 4 is scaling AI. So one of my goals is to drive all of our task forces and the type commanders to phase 4. And when they are there, or when they have set conditions for scaling AI, or actually doing it, I will be ready to declare Navy AI enabled by 2025. That's when I'll go back to the commission, to Congress, and say, we've met the mark because we're scaling AI. That's what I look for. I think that's everything. So just to recap those big 3, AI is a competency. So much of it is practice oriented and doing AI right. Again, to improve operational and corporate efficiency, to remove or risk or reduce humans, remove humans from risk and hazard, and relieve them of the dull, dirty, dangerous stuff. The AI calculus, intelligent, deliberate, and rigorous matching of a problem function to an AI type. Use all the tools in the toolbox, or consider all the tools in the toolbox. That's critical. And then the ethics piece, again, we don't view AI ethics, we view ethics and the accomplishment of AI inside the service-wide scope of ethics, just like any other tool. I think Paul used the driving analogy. I love that one, especially for the ethics. We're not going to put, an AI ethics officer in, or the DMV doesn't put a driving instructor with you every time you get in your car. You are trained, you take a test, and then you're trusted to operate that vehicle according to the rules. In software, they talk about certifying the factory, not the cars, right? That's how you learn to trust algorithms. As long as it's performing to spec or to expectations, and you're using that model, it's good to go. So that's the way we really view ethics. We subscribe to the DoD set of AI ethics. We're going to transmit that to our task forces, make sure they're understood, appreciated, and they'll be used for all the projects in their enterprise. And that's how we're going to manage it. We will not do a project-by-project checklist on a watchdog of AI efforts. So it's pretty much our general approach. And I think that will drive the journey to trust that General Groen talked about. Again, as we move more and more of these capabilities out to the field, I think trust and confidence will raise, just like everybody's pretty much moved away from paper maps to digital maps and navigation systems. Are they perfect? Nope. But we know how well they perform most of the time, and we accept that, the benefits of that, with the risk that comes with it. I think AI is in a similar boat. We'll get to a similar situation. And the clock's ticking, right? So we're on a very short game clock now, and all you need to do is pick up paper to realize that. So with that, I will close up and hand off to my buddy here, Jen.
Thank you. And I actually want to start a little bit differently because I'm not the Chief AI Officer of the Marine Corps. I'm the Assistant Deputy Commandant for Information. And that's an important contextual point for how the Marine Corps is viewing not just AI as a capability, a competency, and a tool set, but also how we're positioning the Marine Corps to operate effectively for the future fight. And our journey actually begins with the pivot from Afghanistan and Iraq to the peer competition and the identification of information as a warfighting function. So General Neller stood up the Deputy Commandant for Information to focus on how do we operate in the information environment. And to put some context around that, because everyone's like, oh, it's that thing you can't see, it's the matrix. It's all and so like put some context to it. By 2025, there will be 175 exabytes of data that could have keys to winning a fight, to influencing an operation. And that's kind of a big number. Well, that's a big number. Folks are like, that's a lot of zeros. Well, if we were to, since I'm a little old school here, if we were to print that or put that on disks, it would be enough, you'd be able to stack those disks up to go to the moon 23 times. So this is a huge terrain and a huge space that we must be positioned to operate in. And so as we start to talk about AI, it's important to understand that point. That our future as a Marine Corps is our force design initiative. So how are we training, operating, how are we equipping our force to operate in that future vision? AI is one of the tools that we see can help Marines be more effective. And what's also equally important, aside from the context, is AI is a journey. And I know folks are like, oh gosh, there's that journey word again. But what do I mean when I say journey? AI radically exposes deficiencies in your .mil PF process. It surfaces those immediately. It's not something that you can ignore anymore. It surfaces it to right in front of you. So you have to, number one, accept that. You have to, number two, realize there's some significant technical debt that you have to deal with, and then you've got to rally your community to knock down those targets while you're building something new. And so as I thought about my remarks today, I could talk about all the thousands of AI efforts that we have going on. I could talk about, our journey overall. But I thought what would be most valuable for this audience would be our top 5 lessons learned. The top 5 things that we're constantly iterating on, that we're constantly refactoring, that we're constantly adapting towards to meet the Commandant's force design priorities. So the first big lesson learned for us is you have to start with intent. So key for Marine Corps, works on the battlefield, works at small unit leadership, works in the AI space as well. And there are 1,000,001 different things that you can do in AI. There's so many different options. But fundamentally accepting that AI is a business and a mission decision, not a technology decision, helps shift your mental model to where you need to be to look at that whole ecosystem. So simple questions of where do you want to use a tool? Where do you want to, what work do you want to offload to a machine? How do you envision a Marine and a machine working together in a particular mission? That's super important. The why here really matters because I'm an engineer. If I don't have that, I'll do what I think is best. And what I think is best is not what our customers or our users think is best. And so the next key of our intent here is you got to write it down. And thankfully, the Commandant did that for us. So in the Commandant's planning guidance, page 14, second column, bottom of the page, you can tell I use this quite a bit. He talked about what is the problem we're trying to address with AI. And I will share that with you because I think it's so powerful as a rallying and contextual feature for our organization. He said, the Marine Corps can no longer accept inefficiencies inherent in antiquated legacy systems that put an unnecessary burden on the warfighter. We do not currently collect the data we do not currently collect data that we systematically need. We lack the processes and technologies to make sense of the data we do collect. We do not leverage the data that we have to identify the decision space in manning, training, and equipping the force. So, awesome problem statement. He then goes on to say, we will make strategic investments in data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Initial investments will be focused on challenges we are confronting in talent management, predictive maintenance, logistics, intelligence, and training. So this sets up a diverse community of 17 different functional areas in the Marine Corps to have precision-like focus of where we're going to start. And so this has allowed us to rally the community together, to set up a working group, to bring in a diversity of thought, to develop roadmaps against these targets with clear return on investment metrics. It's allowed us to take the big ecosystem of everything we could do and focus on specific problems aligned to these capability areas in the context of Force Design 2030. So our number 2 lesson learned is, with that context, we have to focus on solving problems. Real problems that Marines have today. And those Marines exist at the MEF information groups. They exist at the MUs. They do not exist fully in, office buildings. And this has allowed us to avoid AI for AI's sake. My metric of success is, how are we solving that problem that a Marine has? The Commandant created clear consensus around those specific areas. Then we got to unpack it. We got to unpack those areas with focus groups. We got to unpack those areas with different design thinking tools, so we could be precision-like focused on our adoption of this technology. Because I'll be blunt, I don't have the budget that Brett has from the Office of Naval Research, nor do I want to do the same thing that the Office of Naval Research does, or Project Maven does, or the JAIC does. I want to be a smart shopper and a smart consumer. So if I have a problem, I can go shopping for the best solution. I can arm Brett's apparatus at O&R to help solve those problems for me. So I get to use the budget that the Marine Corps has in the most effective way possible. And so as we talk in this solution space, we spend a lot of time with Marines, really quantifying their problems. In the intelligence function, I'll use our Project Maven example. We were a great early adopter of those technologies. Because if you talk to a young sergeant, a lance corporal who's putting together intelligence products, they're spending 80% of their time moving data from one place to another. They're spending a ton of time watching different feeds, trying to determine what's that little nugget that's going to make a difference. So when you talk through, how would that Marine like to offload some of those things to a machine and spend the time doing that value-added work? So not just cutting and copying and putting things into specific files. So we challenge Marines to think through, don't just tell me, sprinkle a little AI on it to make it more better. No, how do you envision this tool set working for you? Do you envision it as offloading something so you don't have to think about it anymore? Do you envision it as an assistive device? Do you envision it as an automative device? Talk us through what that looks like. Because this, again, allows us to bring focus to our efforts, focus to our investments in both financial and time, and then show a clear return on investment to our community. And if you don't do this, AI will highlight it really, really fast. And so I've talked a lot about engaging our users. That is the third biggest lesson learned. How we engage users matters. And there's a ton of things that you can do, but I don't want to be in the business of giving everybody the Christmas sweater that nobody wants. So I want to understand the full gamut of what the user is doing. I want to understand their business process, their mission process. I want to understand the decision space. General Gruan had a great question that he asked commanders. What would you like to know that you don't as you make this decision? These are incredibly insightful details that are not part of your traditional acquisition requirements development process. This gets into the design. And when we talk about delivery of software capabilities, when we talk about the delivery of AI, acquisition isn't our goal. Acquisition is a method. Acquisition is a method to do the 4 big steps of delivering outcomes to users. That starts with design, next goes to development, deployment, and most importantly, disposal. So how do you set yourself up to be successful at all of those phases? It starts by bringing together your cross-functional team. That involves users, that involves customers, that involves decision makers, depending on your business or mission outcome. But you also bring in folks that don't look like those people. You bring in your lawyers. So if you want to talk about building responsible AI up front, let's bring those lawyers in right at the design. Don't figure out like, well, how am I going to implement this at the very end? Build that in up front. Bring together artists. I have an artist that works alongside our development teams. Because again, a different way of thinking about this, a different way of visualizing the problem solution fit. Because if you have that aligned very tightly, you can execute quickly. And I've noticed here, I've talked a little bit about the technology. Most important is the entire ecosystem. The ecosystem of design, development, deployment, and disposal. It's the old adage, the children's song, the foot bone's connected to the leg bone. Every decision that you make along the way will have pros and cons. The ability to surface those, to talk about those in real time, to have mitigations and risks identified is incredibly important to how we use these technologies that will grow and change over time. But these things only matter if you get them into the hands of the users quickly. So let me talk a little bit about our biggest lesson learned there. It isn't just, we can develop things really, really fast. If we look at the value stream, the time value map of where do we spend a lot of our time with some of these very capable systems, it's actually on all that technical debt that we accrued. All those things that we didn't invest in over time, like our networks, like our infrastructure, like our security platforms, like movement to the cloud. So if data is the fuel of AI, the network is the bedrock, and the Marines are the sentinels. So we intrinsically know that you have to have a lot of data to make an AI algorithm, to have an AI algorithm work. But you've also got to have a network. And when I say a network, I'm talking about the alignment of your infrastructure, your platforms, your security services, your data, and your applications. If we were to map our data terrain right now, it's in all different types of places. So that makes deploying an AI algorithm really, really hard. So you have to make, in addition to investing in AI projects, you also have to make investments in your network, in your infrastructure. This is not fun, flashy work. This is like having the hard conversation of, where do I upgrade my circuits? Where do I upgrade my pipes? How many cloud credits do I need to buy? These are all the things that make AI work. You also have to make investments in your people. Brett talked about AI being a competency. We see data and AI that way as well. And we've made some strategic investments from the Marine Corps side in 2 critical occupational fields. So one is the 26XX field. So they used to be a communications specific field, but we've expanded that, changed the entire curriculum to bring in a data flavor. So not only do these Marines understand communication, they also understand where data lives. How does it move from one place to another? How should it move? How can we continuously improve? We've also, you probably heard it, saw in the press, the 17XX, the cyber maneuver field. This also brings in that holistic look, including these technical competencies as well, these technical competencies of AI, but also how do you function in the information environment? So these are critical investments that you have to make in order to make AI useful. Lastly, I will say our biggest lesson learned is beware the salesman and be ruthless in your investment. And I'm not talking just your investment of financial assets, but also where are you investing your time. And Brett and I talk a lot about this. One of the biggest metrics that we use in the DoD is financial metrics. How much money are you spending on AI? I think that's fundamentally the wrong metric. Our metric is based on value. What's the value that we're providing? And we're ruthless about setting that objective and key result and managing our projects to it. And we're also reassessing that every 60 to 90 days because things change very, very rapidly. And as part of that, we get a lot from certain folks of, well, we spent $1 million on X. That's great. I don't want to spend $1 million and one if it's not going to pay off in the end. So we have to have those hard conversations as well. And that's a huge cultural change. Because I came from an acquisition background at one point in my career. I think you heard of probably a rather unique government background. But our metric isn't just how well we spend our money. It's how well we provide the capabilities that Marines need. And so over the course of the last few minutes, I've highlighted some of our biggest lessons learned. I'm happy to talk specific projects if that's of interest to this community. But I really want you to take away those 5 things. Start with intent, solve problems, avoid AI for AI's sake, engage your users and use a cross-functional team to do it, invest in your network, and be ruthless about your investment. And I will close here by just touching on the themes of responsible AI. And notice I didn't specifically dwell on some of that, because responsible use, the themes that General Groen talked about, we fully agree with those. And these are this is part of the Marine Corps culture today. How we apply it for AI may look and feel differently. But the hypothesis of good product development, of understanding how this will be used, those are universal tenets. It just looks a little different when you talk about a specific technology. So, and I'll end with a quote, because AI is change. And if we go to Marine Corps Warfighting Publication 1, MCDP 1, General Gray said a great quote, like war itself, our approach must change. AI forces us to do that. Thank you. So I think now we'll open the floor for questions, Ed.
Thank you so much. I'm Henrik Syse from Prio in Oslo. This is a question I had originally planned to ask Paul Sharp, but it actually fits in well here as well. And that's the sort of control that we have over the manufacturers of these systems. I recently read a book, and this is well-known territory for everyone here, of the power of Facebook, the enormous power of Google, and how much of what we actually do and prioritize is decided by huge tech giants. And of course, this brings us back to Eisenhower's classic, the military-industrial complex. There are some people out there who are actually formulating premises without us necessarily being aware of it. What's your reflection on that? Because you especially, Jennifer, talked a lot about intent. We have to be smart customers. Mm-hmm. We have to know what we want. But how much power do the actual technology developers have? And do we have control over them? By we, I mean politicians and civil society. Thanks a lot for excellent presentations, by the way. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll start. And you can look at the statistics of some of these big tech companies and who are their biggest customers. And a lot of times the government isn't one of those. And so when we talk about, I focus a lot of my time on empowering Marines to understand how things work. Empowering Marines to understand the forces in the information environment, misinformation, disinformation, really understanding fact versus fiction. And so coupling that with this good design, the good rubric associated with AI, we're never going to outpace a big tech company like Facebook. I'm not even going to try. But I want to understand from a user, how would you envision using that technology? And this isn't just asking them that question. This is actually arming Marines with design thinking, lean launchpad, different tools to express what they need, not just say, give me more Facebook or give me more Twitter or anything like that. So that awareness has changed how we are smart consumers, for lack of a better word. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I hope gives you some insights into how we're thinking about that.
Yeah, so no doubt, industry is at the vanguard of this technology right now, okay? It's imperative that we partner smartly and effectively. As Jen mentioned, it's part of your design, how you build your team, how you assemble your partners, right? How we engage with them is one of the several things that has to change in everything we've talked about, our culture, the way we engage with them, the way we expose our problems to them, the way they bring us solutions, and then the way we do something about it. One example of that, I'm very excited to say next week with the Joint AI Center and their TradeWin program, it's an agile acquisition environment. We have over 100 small and non-traditional AI vendors that are going to, for 4 or 5 hours, pitch to Navy and Marine Corps users with problems, requirements. I'll be there. I'll co-keynote that with NVIDIA. They're going to give an industry perspective. I'll give the government perspective, and then we offer 4 hours of engagement. That's unique. We don't typically do that. But it checks the fair and open competition acquisition block, and you can see contracts coming out of that rapidly. That's different. That's us moving a lot faster than we typically do under normal acquisition. So change is coming, things like that. I think, there should be no misconception that we're trailing industry here, and success on our part is bound to effective engagement with those folks in many, many sectors. So hope that helps.
And if I could just add one more thought too. I talked about modernizing our network, our infrastructure. What Brett talked about, the government owning this environment that these technologies need to work in, also ensures that we're getting the best value product and we're not just influenced or trailing, a specific, industry foray. This really allows us to have the best possible products aligned to our problems and have that tight problem solution fit.
And just one more wrinkle on that we mentioned Task Force 59 earlier. One of the things, they just had one of the largest maritime unmanned and AI exercises in the Fifth Fleet environment. And one of the things they did there was exercise what we call COCO, contractor-owned, contracted operated, the technologies and capabilities to go against Navy problems. Again, that's us changing our mind shift that we don't have to own or build everything. There's COCO models. There's also GOCO models, government-owned, contractor-operated. So what you should be hearing is agility, right? Us shifting a little bit and getting more agile. So next question. There's a lot.
Hi, I'm Steve Woodside, West Point. Thanks for your presentation. So you mentioned agility just now, Brett, and I was thinking this a couple talks back, and General Crone talked about be nice, or something to the effect of be nice if we could just use Amazon sort of logistics package or that program, and I'm just wondering if, and then you just mentioned the acquisition. I'm not sure what the terminology is, but some kind of act. Go ahead, yeah.
TradeWin, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was some fair and open competition.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Are those things beginning to get relaxed a bit in order to maybe make it more likely that we could just, hey, Amazon's already solved this logistics thing, we need to do that, or I don't know. I know there's concerns with that too, but yeah, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, and that's actually what the COCO model allows us to do, is concede that point and say where it makes sense, where it's practical and works and delivers what the user wants, and we can do it effectively. We should be pursuing that. So the short answer is yes. I'm seeing attitudes change, even inside the acquisition community. Recently, we find more people reaching for those agile acquisition levers like OTAs, other transaction authorities. There's 2 sections for rapid acquisition and prototyping. Just recently, the department opened up a software-specific color of money to help speed the plow for software development and delivery. I think all those are positive signs that we're starting to see. us, putting those tools in the hands of our sailors and Marines so they can be more agile, more responsive. Because they need to do this within a 5-year program. Okay, we're not going to build and deliver our AI with the Palm, right? A 5-year program. We can't run AI on a scale of. We can run parts of the AI ecosystem on a scale of years, months, but by and large, AI development, delivery, sustainment needs to operate on a scale of minutes, hours, days. That's agility.
Hello, thank you for your talks. Michael Skricker, U.S. Naval Academy. So, on the comments, sir, you just made about working with industry, I was comparing it with physical equipment, ships and rifles and things. These are produced by defense contractors that in many cases exclusively build defense products for government clients. When you're talking with Silicon Valley, those tech giants mostly work with consumer products. So could you maybe speak about difficulties or resistance you find within those companies to working in the defense sphere?
I would tell you that I'm not seeing a lot of resistance from either the big primes or the smaller non-traditional crowds. In my mind, there's room for both. But again, the way we build jets and submarines and aircraft carriers is probably not the way you want to build and deliver AI. So we just need to recognize that both. There was a great quote someone made about the global competition. And the things on the battlefield. If you look across the competitors, the things are pretty much the same on the outside. Tanks, ships, planes. What's going to be the differentiator is the stuff inside, the software. And whoever can update their software the fastest, most effective way, I subscribe to the notion that that's the keystone. That's where the next conflict will be won or lost, is inside the skin of those things. So it's both. It's hardware and software, but it's the software piece that we weren't born digital. We're making that phase shift. If you're start up a company today, whether Silicon Valley or not, you're probably going to be born digital. It's the way the market operates. It's just easier for them. There's a lot of practices we can borrow from them, but we have to now merge those two together, right? It's that shift to being better swimmers in the digital ocean, right? That's what we're going after. That's really, I think, going to move the needle on our ability to meet that mark of 2025.
And if I could add on to that, I think there's been a big shift, I'll just say at large, at the department level, and even, the tech revolution. That kind of the days of you get one contract for an entire system for everywhere in the world. That contains your data, your software, your platforms, your processing. That's really, really, really rare these days. Even when you talk about major acquisitions of things like ships, there are things that are provided by the government, there are things that are provided by other vendors, and those are specified in the contracts. So, and you think about what's the value proposition for a company. If I'm not going to get the big contract to do everything, everywhere, all the time, my value proposition is, well, if I do this one thing well, maybe I can have spin-offs, and I can sell that. I can use that technology in different ways. So there's just been a large perspective shift. We're seeing it working out, and Brett, I think you've said this well before, we're seeing that work out to the advantage for the government, and with all of the tech booms out there, I would say the tech companies are finding it value added as well.
Yeah, for our trade win event next week, we opened up 45 slots. We had over 90 vendors subscribe and register. So that's not resistance, that's eagerness to engage.
Thank you. This has been really interesting. Jen, you mentioned, the possibility of involving lawyers at an earlier stage, a development stage, and so forth. I wonder if you might elaborate on the role they can play. I'm thinking in particular, taking weapon systems. There's a testing and evaluation process. There's eventually a legal weapons review. But in what ways are you seeing lawyers contributing at that earlier point? Thanks.
So to bring that in specifically, I've had the benefit of having some great attorneys from the Commandant's Counsel's Office support our AI efforts. And what's really important about these specific attorneys is they understand the law and they understand technology. They've gone through some advanced training to understand technology. So if we go back to that 4D process, like design, what do they bring to the fight there? Well, number one, they're scanning in a different they're scanning how we're doing it in a different way. So looking at, are we mitigating bias, like up front? Are we looking at, once we develop this, what would it look like? What does this technology look like in a business or a mission context? So if it's something like a weapon system, well, how are you adhering to all of the legal requirements for the use and operation of that? And doing that at the design stage before you even start to build. And then when we get into the build or the development side, they're starting to look at, are we doing it in the legal, ethical, secure manner that we must use? So making sure we're building that all in up front. And the same thing goes when we go into the design, the deployment and disposal context. So making sure, like I'll talk about disposal, technology just doesn't go to Dermo anymore. And it's like just, pulled apart for parts. It's what do we do with that data? How long do we need to keep it? Where do we need to keep it? What would we need to go back and look for if we ever had a legal issue? This is just the diversity of thought process. Like as a tech person, I'll think about how the technology works. A lawyer is thinking about this technology in a totally different way. I think the best phrase I could use to kind of summarize what's the value of all of that: diverse ecosystems perform better over time. That is a scientific proven fact. You see it in biology, you see it in communities. That is the mindset that we bring through our 4D process.
I'm going to let you have the lawyer question, but you brought up a point that I want to just key on because I think it's really critical. It goes under the category of the way we need to change the way we think about things. We have a certain system, I won't name it, but in the field, it collects a vast amount of rich data just to make that platform operate in the battle space. But when the contract was first signed to bring that platform to the field, the way the contract was written marginalized our access to that data. Because when they were writing that contract, they weren't thinking about data as fuel for AI. They were thinking about it as, how's it gonna help that platform operate? Now, as we tried to take data off that platform and brute force it into AI, if we could get access to it, we now know that's a behavior change we need to make to provide, free and unfettered access to platforms like that will be collecting the necessary fuel for AI. Just goes to show you, years ago, we were thinking in a different, set of tolerances and expectations. And now that data's driving the world, software is eating the world, that becomes huge. So to Jen's point, another reason for that multidisciplinary teams and for you to seed that team with the right kind of experts to think about things like that. Because your typical acquisition person might not think of that, but a data scientist or data engineer absolutely will, as well as a lawyer, you pick it. It's a utility team, but it's a great point.
Good afternoon, ma'am and sir. Midshipman Third Class Zimmer. Ma'am, you talked a little bit about how the Marine Corps has its unique take on information as a warfighting domain. Could you talk a little bit about how the unique needs of each service to have its own AI tools specific to its missions, how is that balanced with military-wide concepts like joint all-domain command and control?
So I'll start a bit,
Yeah, go
Brett. As the big DoD-wide concepts provide a mechanism for the services to bring to bear their unique viewpoints, their unique value in a joint fight. So something like JADC2 as an organizing concept, joint all-domain command and control, great strategic intent. And so then we get to break that down through governance means, through different working groups. How would this work in practicality? That's when you get into things like reference architectures, things like data standards, things like TTPs, things like joint requirements. That's an implementation mechanism where all the services work together to get after that strategic intent. When it comes to AI, you have different types of governance levels within the Pentagon. And you have, which has actually been really helpful, we've actually been using AI tools via the JAIC to look at where are we investing and seeking out either elimination of redundancies or making sure that we're all investing in the right way. So there's a practical governance aspect to this. There's just, you got to roll up your sleeves and do a lot of hard work. There's a human connection interaction component to this. And there's also using the tools on yourself to make sure that you're having the right conversations, making the right investments on the right timeline.
Yeah, and I think this is where an entity like the JAIC, or now will soon be the Chief Digital and AI Office, really come into play. And it's perfectly okay for unique implementation, but there are certain things like key pieces of infrastructure, the way we treat data, that should cross services, cross components, and really the JAIC and the CDO that's what they're there for, is to ensure that those fundamental practice, platform, infrastructure that's common across a capability or common to the joint warfight is put in place. So in my perspective, as long as we get the data right, we make sure it's machine readable, it's usable fuel for AI, we're adopting the right good AI design, development, deployment practices, I don't see any problem with the unique implementation, because obviously, I said it before, I'll say it again, for us, AI is general purpose technology, but it's very customized and tailored in its application. It has to be if you do it right, if you're going to do it right. So I have no problem with unique implementation, but that rides on some common things and ways that we need to put in place, and the JAIC and the CDO are there to help us do that.
Thank you very much. That was to get the insight about what's going on in the Pentagon. We rarely see people like you, and thanks for escaping the building for part of the day.
Letting us escape.
Yes. Okay. Please, Thank you. Now I'm just going to Mr. Sears. I'd like to bring up Michael Sears, Director of Innovation for the Stockdale Center. He just wanted to say a few words about an AI-related program he's been working on. And Michael, you have the floor, and thank you for staying.
And I understand I stand between you and lunch. At the Innovation Lab, our mantra is, if a student can use this device, they will, in this day and age. So what we have done is we've taken case studies, ethical dilemmas, and things such as that, and delivered them in an ecosystem using icons or QR codes just like this, so that a student can actually get into an environment and practice and work and make decisions and do it again and again. And as they're doing that, we actually assess what they're doing and how they're doing that. We can deliver that data to students, we can deliver it to instructors. We've had midshipmen go through this scenario. You'll see what this scenario is once you actually image it, because the ask here is that I've got typical midshipmen and other students, 18 to 24-year-old folks who have been through school learning some of this stuff. What I'd love to do is see if I can get some of you, practitioners, ethicists, philosophers, people who have actually been out in the field for a while, and I'd love to be able to see if there's a difference as you go through ethical dilemmas in artificial intelligence. So those of you who have phones, does everyone have a phone? You don't have to do it right now. You'll see in your program guide this sailor looking at a CRT. And if you image, thank you, I can hear those clicks in the background. As you image that, you'll be taken to a couple of different things, a little bit of a cool video holograph, but you'll also be taken to a site that has 10 different ethical dilemmas on them. One of the ethical dilemmas is artificial intelligence. If enough of you do that today or tomorrow morning, I'll be able to actually scrape those numbers and come back possibly and tell you if there's a difference between who you are and who midshipmen are at the Naval Academy. I'm done. Enjoy lunch.